So bring us back around to where we are.
Watching for judgment anxiously.
So it matters to you what others think about everything, or just about you?
About me.
Well, it's a sort of two-edged sword, isn't it? Because when someone adores you, then their judgment is interesting, isn't it? In other words, maybe that's where it got started. Maybe when someone holds you as their object of attention and they do appreciate, and in their appreciation, they're connected to source, so they're sort of flooding it all over you.
No, that's not where it got started. Big surprise. It got started with people who wanted to do my thinking for me, and who were suggesting that my thoughts didn't count, didn't have value, that I have no internal guidance.
You know what's really interesting about this is that we agree with you. We think that is where it got started. And we can feel the clarity with which you know that. And what's hindering you now is not that others want to think for you, but that you think others want to think for you. In other words, it isn't even about them, because most of them are not still doing it.
Well, I hear that, and it's not such a conscious thing that I can catch myself doing what I'm doing. It's almost like a low-level distraction. It's like a TV blaring that that has me off balance, and it's annoying. And then in another instance, I get relief from that by pulling away from people. But that doesn't serve me, because in a narrow sense, it feels better to be a hermit than to expose myself to a situation where I've got this constant distraction.
Well, you see, you're doing what so many do, and we can certainly understand how you get there. You have had an experience which you have accurately analyzed. And you've come to some conclusions. And the conclusions that you have expressed to us here, these accurate conclusions, are: there are people who would like to guide my thinking. There are people who do not agree with my thinking. There are people who think that they have better thinking than I have. And most significantly, I don't like any of that. And as you are visiting with us here, now we know this is the issue that you're wanting to talk about, but every time you describe what is this thing that you do not like, you amplify your vibration around it and make sure that it continues further. And the path of least resistance is exactly opposite of that. The path of least resistance is taking that subject and deliberately trying to diffuse it rather than escalate it. So we would ask you, has there ever been, or is there anyone in your life who does not do what you're describing here? Does everybody treat you that way? So,
no, but primarily the power trippers are the most dramatic in that sense for me. Who have almost, my experience was like being drawn into a spell over a period of time where I was amazed that it seemed to feel better to serve her needs than mine.
We like the word that you chose there because we think it is very descriptive and really worth toying with a little bit. When you say, I feel like I've been drawn into a spell, what we would like you to consider about that is that it isn't a spell that someone else has cast as much as it is a habit of thought that you have practiced. And you know, those are pretty good words, because what you're saying is, I've developed this pattern of seeing myself, or this pattern of approaching this situation in this way, and it's not a way that's working out very well for me. So I'd like to develop another pattern. So how would you develop another pattern? You've got to practice another pattern, and you can literally cast another spell. And so let it from now on be called the spell of allowing. In other words, that's why we call it an art, because it is something that you have to practice. Do you get it that the path of least resistance is not action, that it's about thought? And do you get it that every time you discuss something that doesn't please you, you just empower that thought that much more and keep that vibration active and alive within you that much longer? In other words, it's the perpetuation of the spell, isn't it? Now, I want to chew on something here. You're helping us to put this into a clear place, because you get the sense of the path of least resistance. In other words, can you feel what that is? Can you feel that the path of least resistance is the path of allowing the well-being that is natural? So Now, think in terms of this path of least resistance, and then ask yourself, what is the easiest thought that I have relative to this subject? And you say, well, I can tell you what the easiest thought is, Abraham. It's easier for me to think about it not going the way I want it. It's easier for me to use words like power tripper. It's easy for me. That's my path of least resistance. It feels like that's my path of least resistance because that's where I go most easily. And we say, it's interesting how something that you do not want can come to be what feels like the path of least resistance because, frankly, relative to this subject, it's easier for me to have a negative thought than it is a positive thought. So isn't the path of least resistance really for me on this subject more negative than it is positive? And we say, it seems so. But if you were to step back from the immediacy of this particular subject and contemplate your life experience from your inner being's perspective, then clearly the path of least resistance would be the one that feels the best, not the one that's vibrating the loudest. So when we're talking about the art of allowing, what we're really talking about is practicing alignment with who you really are on subjects where it's easier to do that until you reconnect on a more consistent level with who you really are. And once you do that, the path of least resistance will always feel like the one that feels the best. Every now and again, we'll see you or any of you get wrapped up on some subject that is really troubling to you. And you can get into a real rant about it where the thoughts just start streaming. You get yourself so wrapped up in it. And then you hear Abraham talking about the path of least resistance, and it sounds silly to you because it feels to you like where you automatically go must certainly be the path. In other words, water flows downhill. That's the path of least resistance. So what we're saying to you is if your thoughts are flowing downhill, so to speak, if the easiest thoughts that come to you are thoughts that really don't feel good when you get there, it is a sure sign that you've really been practicing those thoughts for a long time so that you have a lot of that activated in your vibration. And you say, well, that's not hard for me to understand because here I am still talking about it. In other words, it's the thing that I talk about often because it's the thing that I remember from a variety of experiences, and it's the thing that is most immediate in my life now. So what we're suggesting to you is you have to somehow break away from what's really immediate in your life, and you have to find some other thoughts that are less resistant in nature and make them more active. This is not different than talking to someone who has a disease in their body, and the disease in their body is so evident to them. They can feel it with physical discomfort, or they can see it with some way of looking at it. And when we say to them, you've got to stop thinking and speaking about that, they say, it's very difficult because it's so present in my experience. And it seems that the path of least resistance is to talk about it and continue it. And we say, you just got to decide whether you're going to approach your life from the perspective of who you really are, or whether you're going to be stuck in this hole for a little bit. And in other words, you got to somehow rise above the immediacy of what's causing the activation and find some way of activating something that feels better. So what we would do is we would get off the subject of this particular person, and we would try to find paths of least resistance. In other words, how do your relationships usually go? What you're wanting to do is step back from the immediacy of this thing that is vibrating in a way that doesn't suit you into something that is more general and try to find a little more breathing space. So if you would, we would like you to begin making some statements. Well, better still, we'll offer a series of statements to you, and you choose of the statements that we are offering, which feels like the path of least resistance. Now, this is the most important part of this game that we're going to play. We're not asking you which is the truest. We're not asking you what you're really living. We're asking you to try to look at it from the perspective of who you really are and give us that gut response of which of these scenarios that we offer to you actually feels like the path of least resistance to you. So, I have this relationship where there is constant deliberate manipulation going on. I have a relationship where this is just the personality of this person.
Just the personality.
Does feel better, doesn't it? It is important to me that this person change the personality. There are aspects of the personality that I enjoy.
There are aspects I enjoy.
It is necessary for me to toe the line in a specific way in order to get along. I can do pretty much what I want without enormous negative repercussions. We're not asking how it is. We're asking which feels freer and better. I'm in bondage. I'm free to choose.
I don't feel free to ask for what I want.
Well, now, you have to play our game the way we want to play it. You see, what you're doing there is true. You don't feel free. But that is still escalating the very thing that we are trying to de-emphasize here. And so don't lose sight of what this game is. We're reaching for a little more air. We're reaching for the path of least resistance. We're not trying to guide you into action yet. The action will become clear later on. We're just trying to get you back in touch with who you really are, relative to a subject that's been keeping you pretty much out of touch, at least from the vantage point that you're approaching it here and now. So I have to toe the line in order to get along at all, or I have choices within this relationship.
I have choices.
I would like to exercise more of my choices in order to have more control within the relationship. I have ultimate control of my experience no matter what anybody else thinks.
Those both sounded reasonably positive. And I can't honestly say that I have ultimate control.
Well, we're not asking you to be honest about anything. We're asking you to reach for what would feel the best. In other words, would you like to have control of your experience, or would you like to be in bondage? We didn't say which is it. We say which feels like what you would choose. And what's happening to you, and it's normal, is when you've been living something and you've been practicing the thought of what you've been living, and you've decided that it's inappropriate and then you don't want to live it anymore, and further, you've decided that it's somebody else's fault that you are living it, and that is kind of wafting in and out of this. In other words, almost everybody who is standing in a place where you're standing is wanting the other person to do something different. And what we're wanting you to do is to practice some thoughts that feel different to you, and then it won't matter what the other person is doing.
Well, I definitely want to be different, and I have no expectations of somebody changing to suit that. I'm okay with that one.
So it is all right with me if things continue on as they are. I would like to view things through different eyes so that I can feel differently.
Yes.
It is necessary for this person to change in order for me to feel better. I can find ways of approaching things and feel better no matter what the other does.
Yes, I'm the one who wants me to change, and I'm finding that one difficult.
It is difficult for me to find a way of looking at this that feels good. With a little bit of effort, I can find a way of looking at this that feels good.
With a little bit of effort, I can find a way.
As I reach for thoughts that feel better, it gets harder and harder. As I reach for thoughts that feel better, it gets easier and easier.
It's easier.
As I connect with who I am and become more sensitive to feeling good, I will change the behavior of those around me. As I reach for who I am and I get feeling good, their behavior becomes less significant to me. My freedom is in my ability to control others. My freedom lies in my ability to feel on purpose.
Yes, definitely.
Ooh, it feels better already, doesn't it? In other words, I love the idea of feeling so good that I'm not affected by others.
That's exactly what I want.
I love the idea of feeling so good that I'm not affected by others. Now, can you feel that just with a few simple choices, and we held you reaching, in other words, we weren't going to let you take the path that didn't feel good. We were going to make certain that you found the path that felt better. But do you see how much better you feel? And can you feel how what we were talking about just a moment ago feels diffused already? In other words, you found a path of less resistance. You're less resistant right now than you were. Now, granted, you feel less trapped. You feel more in control. And now, some thoughts that move through your mind might be, well, Abraham, you guided me. It's not so easy for me to do it. But that would...
I don't even need to talk here, do I?
But that would be escalating something that you don't want. And so as you find a thought like that beginning to come, then you offer the other. Well, with some practice, I can get good at it. And I know my life experience very clearly. And I really know what I'm looking for. And there are so many aspects in my life that are going well. And I have so many dynamic relationships that are working with so many people. And it is a good indicator that this matters so much. It must mean that there's something that I really want here. In other words, otherwise I would just walk away from it altogether. There's so much more in balance that is of value for me here than there is not.